nice and cushy. Well, I'm happy to welcome today Kate Anderson, who is with Alliance Defending Freedom, Sarah Parshall Perry, whose title, I'm not sure which one I'm supposed to use because you have so many wonderful titles, but who is an absolute legal expert, policy expert, who's with us, and of course, the Florida Commissioner of Education, Kamoutsas. Our panel today is called How Law, Policy, and Leadership Are Reshaping American Education. And we have so many examples of this year that we're gonna get to talk about. Many of them finally going in the right direction. Like, we actually have good news about what's happening in the courts. Sarah, let's start with you. What are some of the biggest challenges facing education today, and how are those being overcome, especially through the legal system?
Parental disenfranchisement, and that is code for a lot of different policies that are affecting a lot of different families across the country. It took COVID for all of us to wake up and realize exactly what was happening behind the computer screens that we were being told not to look at. I was actually looking over my son's shoulder. I was actually senior legal counsel to the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the Department of Education, working for the government in education at home while online educating 3 of my children. And I heard a teacher say, make sure your parents are not within earshot. Why? Because they were being instructed on things like white privilege and breaking down colonialized structures. So we realized, I think all of us, if there was one good thing we took from COVID, it was we finally woke up. We finally recognized what was happening. We didn't blithely send our children to government public schools anymore without the expectation that something was going on behind the scenes to which we were not being privy. And I think Kate understands this full well. She is litigating in this space. One of those aspects of parental disenfranchisement are the gender secrecy policies that our organization has been tracking across the country. At Defending Education, we have counted more than 1,100 public school districts representing 12.3 million children in this country who are in schools with express gender secrecy policies that require staff to lie and obfuscate to custodial parents about a minor's gender identity. This is not just a contagion. At this point now, it's a wildfire, but we have just seen 3 cases go up to the Supreme Court on petitions for review, cert petitions. Kate can talk about this as well. We are hopeful that this will finally be the year that the Supreme Court will tell us, yes, you have a right to know how your child identifies when they are at school. Yes, you have a right to also access their educational records and the ones that are even being hidden in emails and social media posts. All of it, that is all part of a child's educational record. Last term, we got the Mahmoud versus Taylor decision. Praise God for that. That was an absolute slam dunk. And surprising, of course, no one, the 3 liberals voting in a block in the dissent. I think it just for us hearkened us to the fact that, yes, we are still in charge, but yes, it will require litigation, and yes, sometimes it will go all the way to the Supreme Court.
Awesome. And Kate, you could obviously talk to us about the benefits of the Mahmoud decision, how that's going to trickle out. Say something about that, but also what's coming up in the lower courts that you guys are seeing at ADF and working on.
Yeah, so Mahmoud was a great decision. It was a great decision because it spoke to this issue that's at the core here. Do parents have rights within the public schools? And this came after a history of 100 years ago, we just celebrated the anniversary, was the Pierce decision. And that decision is the one that you often hear about, where the Supreme Court said, the child is not the mere creature of the state, and parents are the ones that direct the upbringing and education of their kids. But since that decision, there just wasn't much in the law, especially from the Supreme Court, that put meat on that bones and explained what does that right mean. Everyone was sort of taking it for granted. We then hit the 90s and the 2000s, and there was a whole string of cases on sex education that went very, very poorly. And so we were living pre-Mahmoud in a world where the public schools acted like they had carte blanche. Parents can choose public school, private school, or homeschooling, but once they pick public school, then teachers get to make all the decisions. The administration gets to make all the decisions. And they would cover this in the idea of curriculum, that they had to govern all the curricular decisions, but then curricular decisions suddenly became everything. And so that was where things were when the Mahmoud decision came out. And this involved curriculum, as many of you know, LGBT-focused books that they said in their own materials were designed to disrupt conservative values and traditional ideas about gender, and they were teaching them to kids as young as kindergarten. And so this is a problem that went all the way up. Unfortunately, they lost at the lower courts, but sometimes we win by losing, and that's what happened, is they lost at the lower courts and got to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said that what the school district was doing, not allowing parents to opt out of those books, violated the parents' free exercise rights. They have a right to raise their kids according to their faith, and that these books violated that. That's important because it was a great win that broke open the schoolhouse gates and said, parents now make these decisions. It anchored it in our faith, which is also good. But what we need to come is anchoring it as well in our rights as parents, because all parents, whether they're religious or not, have the right to direct their kids' upbringing and make those decisions. So we're starting to see that bubble up in the lower courts, and speaking directly what Sarah was saying, those secret transition cases, there are a lot of these policies, and there are becoming a lot of litigation on it. And I think that's a powerful tool to stop what's going on and to get the next win that we need on this issue, to make sure that it's parents' rights to direct their kids' upbringing and education, that's going to be protected at the highest level, like free speech and religious freedom and other important fundamental freedoms. And so we've seen some wins in that, even at the lower courts. In Kettle Moraine, Wisconsin, we worked with the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty and got a great win, a case where the school district told parents that their daughter, who was struggling with her identity, that they were going to socially transition her no matter what the parents said. And the court came through and in the trial court said that that violates parents' rights, and talked about education and upbringing and healthcare, which is part of why these cases are so powerful, is that they hit at so many aspects of the parental right. So they have the ability to secure rights both in education and upbringing and in healthcare, which is important. We also just recently got an early ruling in a case out of Michigan where the school district had secretly transitioned this 12-year-old girl, and they were going so far as to change the records that they were sending home to mom and dad. So they were erasing the male name and putting her female name back on her real name, back on the records, while working very closely with her parents on an IEP plan. And the court, in that case, it was on an early effort from the school district to try to dismiss the case. But what was interesting is that the court kept the case in court and ruled on it as a parental rights case. So walked through the correct analysis on parental rights, and said that under the 14th Amendment, these parents' rights could be violated by this kind of a policy. So I think that case is going to continue. As Sarah said, there are many to come at the Supreme Court, and so we're hopeful that's the next step to get that next win.
Awesome. I mean, you know you're shady when you're changing the records and changing the name back to what you know the parents want to see before you send things home. We in Florida were not immune from this. There was a time when these gender transition plans were rampant in our own public schools here in Florida. Those have since been, legislation has been enacted to eliminate those across the state, and I know since the commissioner has been in office, he has also advanced curriculum transparency. We've done a lot here in Florida to be a leader on this so that as you go back to your states, you can say, hey, do what Florida did. But Commissioner, tell us what Florida has done to ensure that we don't need these lawsuits in our state. We're already protecting parents' rights.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought up the Mahmoud decision, because that really is a reflection of House Bill 1467 that took place in 2023. And so I'm glad to see what Florida did a couple of years ago. Now parents across the nation will be able to benefit. But I want to give a little bit of background. I was the general counsel at the Department of Education when we had some of these major legal fights. I remember being in the general counsel's office when we fought to keep schools open. We fought to push back on mask mandates. We fought for fairness in women's sports. Battle after battle, we have led the nation in the state of Florida thanks to the leadership of Governor DeSantis. But I also want to give credit to the folks that don't often get it. The Crystal Marules, the Jennifer Pippins, the moms who showed up to our meetings. The moms who showed up to our meetings to let us know what was happening at the local level. I see so many representatives that are here today that have also been in the fight with us. Jennifer Kennedy, Kim Kendall, Monique Miller, and Yvette Benaroche, who was one of those moms. I remember her being at those State Board of Education meetings with Jamie Merchant. All these folks that I've gotten to get to know over the years, because they have brought to our attention the issues that are taking place at the local level. And thanks to this governor, thanks to this legislature, thanks to the people of the state of Florida, we have not been afraid to take on these fights. And those fights continue today. We saw in the immediate aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I was appalled by what I was seeing educators post publicly. We have a teacher in Clay County, Florida, who posted when Charlie Kirk was assassinated at a school campus that this wasn't the obituary I was hoping for, but it's a close second for me, insinuating that she actually wanted the President of the United States to be the individual who had been assassinated. Glorifying, celebrating, condoning a school shooting is not going to be tolerated in Florida. We do anticipate additional litigation as we fight back on this, but we're not afraid of it because we've done it before, and we're going to always put students first in the state, and we're going to lead by example.
The commissioner deserves a lot of credit. Governor DeSantis, who has been so great on these issues and protecting parents' rights his entire time in office. We are very, very fortunate here in Florida as parents. In other states, though, there are blue states, and there are, I'm sure, blue states represented here, where parents are going, do I really have to wait for these court cases to make their way through in order to protect my rights as a parent? Talk to us, Sarah, about what's going on at the federal department level, perhaps, that may be affecting decisions in blue states and protecting the rights of parents in those states, despite what they may be doing on the local level.
Yeah, so we hear a lot of talk about the Department of Education shutting down. They're essentially on a kamikaze mission, right? So one thing to sort of caveat that entire line of discussion with, we have been calling for dismantling of the Department of Education since 1980 and Ronald Reagan. So we recognize we have to get over a 60-vote threshold in the Senate, and right now it's highly unlikely. But the Department of Education, in laying off about 42% of its staff, that's called a reduction in force. It's called a RIF, 42% of its staff, which recognized, and even I as a former employee at Department of Education recognized exactly how bloated the Department of Education was. But what's happening at the federal level is that they are getting down to essential work functions, and they're cutting a lot of the bloat, a lot of the unnecessary spending. Remember that for $3 trillion, trillion with a T, that has been spent since 1980 on public education, we've seen nothing but plummeting national assessment of education progress scores. Right now, we sent 30% of our American high schoolers off to college with basic literacy in math and English below level. That's 30% of college students. Why do you think Harvard University now offers remedial math? It's not because the Department of Education's been doing a bang-up job, I can tell you that much. So what they're doing is they're getting back down to essential functions. They're utilizing the power of the purse, which Congress gave them through the Department of Education and its statutory civil rights law, like Title VI, preventing race discrimination, like Title IX, preventing sex discrimination, to make sure that universities, colleges, schools, school districts, state superintendent's offices are all following federal law, because federal law, we know, is what informs state law. And contrary state laws in states like California, Oregon, Washington, and we've seen it. We've actually filed quite a number of civil rights complaints in those particular states for that reason, have said, no, rules for thee, but not for me. We will not adhere to federal policy, federal directive, federal mandate, and federal law. We're going to follow contrary state law. Well, you saw what happened with Janet Mills in Michigan. She told the president she would see him in court. I don't know if she thought it would come with a money-back guarantee. That is exactly what we're seeing with a lot of these blue states. So for the blue states, I want to encourage you by telling you, yes, the cavalry is coming. Unfortunately, right now, the cavalry is coming. Right now, unfortunately, due to what we know is a stopgap right now in Congress and the fact that the Democrats are more interested in funding health care for illegals than they are actually keeping things open, we are unfortunately seeing furloughs, but I can tell you for the friends that I have inside the administration, for the attorneys who are some of the smartest in the nation, they are continuing to work. They are burning the midnight oil. They are continuing to dissolve and investigate all of the civil rights complaints that are being filed by our organization, by allies across the country. So my first encouragement is you are being heard. Yes, there is a backlog, but let me tell you, the power of a federal complaint, when you go online and you submit through that portal a federal complaint, and you don't have to be a lawyer to do it, your submission of that complaint has to be read and adjudicated by the U.S. Department of Education, and they have to do so within 180 days. So don't worry, you are being heard, the cavalry is coming, so put your head down and keep on going, because I will tell you that relief is on the horizon.
Good news. I know they are working very hard to dispense of some of these cases that the Biden administration left that were open for years, so that they could continue to use it to try to find things that they want to use for their political purposes. So we have an incredible team led by Secretary Linda McMahon. We are very fortunate to have her as our Secretary of Education. And the portal, I just want to make sure that we highlight that there is a place on the Department of Education website if you do know of violations of Title IX, Title VI, and others, that you as a citizen can just go on and submit that complete yourself. I think that's really important. Kate, for the moms and dads too, I know there are some in this room, what can they do right now to protect their parental rights at the local level and perhaps even at the state? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I'm kind of keying off of what Sarah was saying. What you're doing matters so much. The grassroots movement is what has led the courts to step in. It's what's led the administration to open up the portals and to encourage OCR complaints. And so we're seeing just the standing up, the information that sways the people that can make the real difference, the lawmakers and the courts and the federal government. And so keep doing that. Stay informed, keep speaking out. I mean, how many Supreme Court wins have we gotten out of Colorado? And that's a very blue state.
And by the way, we also just sued Colorado as well, so maybe there'll be a fourth on the horizon.
And in my state, I'm in Washington State, they passed through initiative a bunch of parental rights. Now they're fighting with the legislature that's tried to repeal them, and they're having to go back and forth, but there are ways to do that. So paying attention to the good laws that can be passed in your state. There's a lot of groups working on the legislative work. ADF does too, and has a map that sort of describes each state and whether they are green, yellow, or red on their parental rights laws. But being involved in those laws, being involved in just your local community matters a ton. In terms of other practical things for your kids in your schools, Mahmoud told us we get opt-outs. Opt-outs matter when we have notice of what's going on in the schools. So asking for records, getting the information. There's a lot of groups that are putting together sample opt-out forms. Moms for Liberty has one. I think that Defending Ed does. The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty has one. And I think some of the key pieces there are trying to opt out as specifically as you can to whatever the curriculum is that you want your kid not to be exposed to. And listing, if you have a religious objection, including that, because that was the core holding in Mahmoud. But with that opt-out, some of it's a little bit experimental as parents are really enforcing that right, and I think there's gonna need to be some definition on what the opt-out looks like. Is it punishment that really, like the alternative situation is more punishment than an alternative? Can it move outside of the LGBT context? So we hear about like horror curriculums that parents wanna get opted out of. So pressing into the opt-out rights and really pressing into getting noticed by asking for your students' records, asking for curriculum, paying attention to what's going on in the courtroom. And with asking for curriculum, I always tell people, ask for the secondary sources too, because the core curriculum isn't always everything that's being taught. So look for those secondary sources. But just keep pressing forward. What we learn from Supreme Court wins is that you have these great moments, but they only matter if you continue to press forward and to assert your rights from those, and then you see that happening in the day-to-day lives of people. So I encourage everyone to take Mahmoud and just really press into it.
Awesome. Stassi, tell us what state-level policies or actions of your department that have been effective in connecting parents to the decisions that are being made about their children in our schools.
Well, I think the biggest thing has been school choice for parents to feel empowered. I mean, Florida has 2.8 million students, and 1.4 million of those students are in a school choice program in one way, shape, or form. That is just remarkable, because when you deal with, that's something worth applauding. And I thank the governor, I thank the legislature in 2023 through the passage of House Bill 1, we were able to do universal school choice. And you look at the numbers, over 400,000 students are in a charter program. Over 550,000 students are on a scholarship at a private school. Over 150,000 students are in a homeschool. And the list goes on in educational option after educational option, because parents are at a point now here in Florida where they don't have to deal with the public school system, where they don't have to deal with the bureaucracy. I was raised by a single mom of 3 kids who made no more than $30,000 her entire life. I saw it firsthand as she advocated for me, where she was treated as if she was unsophisticated. She didn't know the best interest of her child. This is somebody who took me home from the hospital, who fed me, who clothed me, who changed me, who made sure that my entire life, she literally obsessed over everything that was going to impact me. And you're going to tell me that she doesn't know what's in the best interest of me as her child? Give me a break. And so it's great to see. It's great to see that in the state of Florida, as I travel the state and as I hear from parents, the single most appreciated issue that they have told me they are grateful for is school choice. The ability to be able to move their child to an educational environment that best fits their child's needs. And so we will continue to empower parents. We will look at legislation as we work with the legislature and the governor to ensure that we do not rest on our laurels, because we know that it is so important for a child's educational success for that parental involvement to be at the forefront of that child's teachings. And we've been unapologetic about that. You know, I started just 3 months ago, day one on the job. I sent a memo to every single parent in the entire state, reminding them of the legislation that's been done over the years of this governor, reminding them of their rights as parents. As we entered the school year, I reminded them about progress monitoring that has been significantly impactful for children's success, saying, pay attention to the data. It's coming up within the first 30 days of the school year. You will see that your child's going to have a lot of information that's going to essentially tell you as the parent what their strengths and what their weaknesses are. Pay attention to that, parents. We'll do another one here shortly to remind these parents that now we finished progress monitoring window 1. Pay attention to that data, because it's important that you be involved in your child's life as it relates to education. You should be directing those decisions and making sure that everything going on in that child's life you are familiar with, and that's why we have led not just in academic achievement, not just in school choice options, but in academic transparency as well, so that parents know exactly what is going on in their child's learning environments.
And that's so critical, as we are in a national emergency when it comes to academic performance in this country. Every parent deserves to know how their student is performing academically. And if we weren't being so distracted by all of these culture wars in our classrooms, we could get back to being focused on the things that matter in the schools, which is making sure our students are prepared to achieve the American dream. That's a great resource here in Florida and other states too that are showcasing how the students are doing to the parents. As we wrap up, I want to just hear from each of you. What's your favorite resource to share with parents that they should be looking at, maybe on a regular basis or when they're needed? Why don't we start with you, Sarah?
I'm just going to plug our organization, Defending Education.
Go for it.
I hate to do it. Shameless self-promotion, I know. But we have something called the Indoctrination Map. So I love ADF's map about where parental rights are the strongest. The corollary for us, and for those of you who don't have the blessing of living in a state with a school choice program like Florida, which is tremendous, and are relegated to public schools. I have 2 kids with special needs. I was relegated to public schools by a function of being not only a single mom, but also having 2 children with a disability. I was in the public school format. It's what gave me passion for value-neutral, high-quality public education. That's what we set out to protect as well. And one of the things we have is an indoctrination map. You can search your state, your school district, and the particular policy. Are they using race-based programming? Are they allowing girls into biological boys' bathrooms? Are the sports teams open? Do they have ethnic studies curriculum that celebrate the atrocities of October 7th? All you have to do is click on Indoctrination Map. You can search by school, state, and policy, and you can find out what's happening in your own backyard.
And what's that website again?
It is defendinged.org.
Okay, awesome. Kate.
Yeah, that's a great resource. ADF also, I mean, there's so many organizations with great resources, and I think everyone has kind of done something a little different, which is fun. We did a parental rights guidebook that's available on our website, adflegal.org. We also have student guides and educator guides, and we're continuing to update them regularly to try to capture new law, new decisions, new things that parents need to know, but trying to just get some practical resources and tips into the hands of parents.
Awesome. And if all of these things fail and you need an education option for your children and you think, I'm just going to have to start my own school, you can go to youredfreedom.org and access a free Start a School toolkit that will help you get from idea to school, including if it's a charter, if it's a private school, how you get government funding to help parents access it tuition-free, youredfreedom.org. That's the Education Freedom Foundation. So lots of great resources for parents. Thank you so much to our incredible panel and all the hard work that they do protecting your rights every single day. Please give it up for them. Before we wrap, I have instructions here on telling you about something really important I know a lot of you are interested in, artificial intelligence. And tomorrow at 1:30, the main stage debate is going to be about AI. So whether you think that AI is going to lead to Skynet or some utopia, you are going to want to hear this debate. Artificial intelligence is here. We do have to deal with it and understand how to protect our children and how to use it ethically and responsibly. And Moms for Liberty has been shown incredible leadership on this, not to ignore it, but to say, how are we going to equip our parents to exercise their rights in this area? So definitely tune in here tomorrow at 1:30. And if you have questions that you want addressed on that panel, you can submit them at the Moms for Liberty Academy table or at the Braver Angels table out there. And the breakout sessions for this afternoon are going to be on the screens as you exit. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
How I still remember the words Grandma said. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Let truth and justice lead you. Follow peace with every man. And let your light shine bright throughout this dark